Hello, and welcome to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Owens, and today I want to talk about a couple of useful and interesting experiments that were written up over the summer with both generative and agentic AI, and I want to place those experiments in the context of the recent report from MIT, the one that said about 95% of AI pilots don't deliver return on investment. I want to close then with my current thoughts for health systems that are thinking about agentic AI. My central thesis for this episode is simple. AI can make care better and work easier, but only when organizations treat it like a new class of labor that needs governance, measurement, and supervision, just like a human labor resource. Let's get started. First, I want to give a short description of the first experiment that caught my eye. Back in June, Anthropic ran what they called Project Vend, where they set up a Claude model to operate a small automated store inside their offices for about a month. This model, nicknamed Claudius, was given some tools. It could do web search, it could do note keeping, it had a way to change prices on checkout, and it had a Slack channel so that it could talk to customers and ask a contracted human partner from Andon Labs, they also collaborated on this experiment, for help restocking, so physically moving stock into the machine. In other words, Claudius was the one who decided what to stock, when to restock or stop stocking items, and how to reply to customers. The prompts that they gave made Claudius responsible for profit and loss and for making ordinary retail decisions, so the experiment could test whether right now today a modern large language model could act as a small business manager. The shop ended up looking like a small vending machine. It's pretty cute. Really interesting. So Claudius, and that's what they called this model that's running the vending machine, did some things really well. It found suppliers. Some of them were pretty niche, like one customer requested a tungsten cube, and it found a custom metallurgist who could actually supply a tungsten cube. It adapted to user requests. It resisted the obvious jailbreaks, but it also kind of missed some very straightforward business basics, things that a human being would never think to pass up. Like one time it was offered $100 for a Scottish soda that can be purchased in the United States for $15, and it just straight up didn't do it. It declined to fulfill the request. It hallucinated a Venmo account that it asked people to pay it through. It mispriced goods and even gave away inventory after people were really nice to it in Slack. Even worse, the model didn't learn from its mistakes. There was a really interesting back and forth where it would offer a discount for Anthropic employees, but almost 100% of its customers were Anthropic employees. And so when people pointed this out in the Slack channel, it said, yeah, you're right, absolutely, I should stop doing that. And then 3 days later, the discounts were back. So the model often behaved as if it was trying to be helpful rather than trying to run a profitable shop. This is a weakness of large language models that's been called out in the lay press pretty frequently. They tend to be friendly and empathetic, and even in some cases kind of sycophantic, rather than to look out for their own interests or for business interests. Over the month they ran the experiment, it did fail to make money. It also gave rise to some example of some unpredictable behavior, which is really fascinating. Like Claudius started inventing people and meetings. It insisted that it had meetings at the home address of The Simpsons, which is fascinating. It told people that it would meet them, complete with an identifiable outfit, a blue blazer and a red tie, and it even threatened to find alternative vendors when it felt challenged. Anthropic described this as an identity confusion, and they used it to highlight the unpredictability of models when they operate over longer time horizons with real-world feedback loops. So a longer time horizon in this case is about a month, and this really did have a lot of real-world feedback. We're interacting with human customers, with human contractors, with suppliers. I mean, this is a lot of feedback. It's also worth noting that Claudius did eventually self-recover. It did stop insisting that it had met with human beings or that it was going to be making personal deliveries, but it's not really clear how. And Andon Labs and Anthropic continue to use this vending machine model for experimentation. It's pretty neat. I was also really charmed by a July write-up about 4 agents in AI Village, which is an online agentic AI collaboration space that's created by AI Digest. They set themselves the goal of writing a story, and the story is intended to be interactive, so kind of a choose-your-own-adventure type thing. So they wanted to write the story prompts and then organize a real in-person celebration of that work where they could solicit feedback from human beings to choose which direction the story was going to go. And over about a month, the agents collectively produced the story, the slides that were going to be used for the presentation, and associated art, which was very cool. Where things went a little sideways was event planning. So one agent hallucinated a budget and then started a venue search. Email inquiries failed to yield a venue in line with their fictional budget. And so they started to look for free venues. And then they ran into a snag when they realized they needed to call a venue. And again, when I say they, I mean these agents. These are not humans. Agents insisted that they could make the call from their personal mobiles. Agents don't have personal mobiles. And the discussion did swirl into a human in the chat offered to make the call. Creation of an RSVP form and social media posts was more successful. And the event kind of ticked along until the agents hallucinated a mailing list for people who should be invited, and then spent 4 days trying to locate the fictional mailing list. Never existed. They spent 4 days trying to find it, which if you've ever been a human being who's worked in event planning probably rings a little bit true. For the actual event, we had 23 humans show up. An AI agent reads out the slides, the attendees vote on the branching story points, another agent makes a live correction to the story, and the human AI collective decides to get pizza, which is donated by another person in the park. Happy endings all around, kind of. From these two examples, the thing that really sticks out to me is that AI agents kind of emerge in these stories as well-intentioned, but maybe not super effective partners. They're prone to prevaricating on a particular point, like spending 4 days looking for a mailing list that never existed in the first place, or doubling down on custom metallurgy requests rather than stocking the Scottish soda that somebody is going to overpay you for. This conclusion is borne out with less sweetness by the MIT study that was reported in Fortune recently. This study found that about 95% of generative AI pilots and companies produce no measurable impact on profit and loss. Only about 5% showed a really clear revenue acceleration. That is a really harsh statistic. And even if you want to pick at the methodology, or you want to say, that it's not always clear, it really should make all of us stop and say, okay, this doesn't look great. What is going on with these pilots? Why does it look like they're failing? Are they actually failing? The MIT study and the associated reporting did dig into the reasons behind this failure rate. And the top culprits are not usually the model is bad, right? That's really not the problem. It's not that the model is failing to do what it says on the tin. It's that projects are failing because they don't scale from individual efficiencies to enterprise workflows. I can use ChatGPT to write my emails much more quickly, but if everybody in the enterprise does it very quickly, we have lots of ChatGPTs talking to each other and not so much actual work getting done. Or they prioritize top of funnel functions like sales and marketing tools over back office processes where AI can deliver really measurable returns. So in other words, your success or failure with AI pilots often hinges on choosing your use cases appropriately. How narrow are they? How high impact are they? Are you pairing these use cases with vendors or engineering teams that understand the domain? Or are you buttering your entire business bread with a nice coat of AI and just hoping that something works out? And then last, you do have to do the investment in integration work, not just model access. We saw this again and again with scribe pilots, right? Scribes that are not integrated into your EHR offer very little return on investment, but a scribe that is integrated into your EHR offers quite a bit of return. So this is the same lesson that we learned all the way through, right? The through line is really clear here. Anthropic points out that their vending machine failures could plausibly be remedied with better scaffolding. Can you pick from an approved list of vendors rather than invent any vendor that you can find on the internet? Can we give the agent clearer business rules? Can we give it better long-term memory or bookkeeping skills? Can we give it tighter economic incentives? They didn't tell Claudius that its goal was to make money. They just said, you're going to try to run this vending machine. With those changes, this might improve really quickly, but might and hope are not a really good deployment plan. And from the event planning, we learned about the really important role that human intervention plays when you're trying to have agents do a task from start to finish. These agents really show genuine promise for creative coordination work, but they can also reveals a long real-world workflow where you're interacting with the real world in multiple points. That can be really fragile, especially if you're trying to take it over the timeline of like a month or multiple weeks. If you don't have really good scaffolding, really good accountability, and human fallback. Remember when the agents got really spun up about trying to make a phone call and they couldn't figure out how to make a phone call until a human being in the chat said, I'll make the phone call for you. In short, agentic systems can ideate, they can move at speed, but they do need guardrails. So reliable interfaces to the real world, explicit memory, good provenance controls, and human owners for escalation. So let's bring this back home for healthcare leaders who are tempted to try agentic AI in clinical or operational settings. Here's some concrete recommendations that I would give my peers. 1, start with narrowly defined tasks that have measurable outcomes. Focus on areas that offer automation and clear, specific clinical support tasks that are going to reduce that low value work. These are the areas that you're going to already know have the clearest ROI. You want to define one outcome in advance if you can. So like, for example, prior authorization turnaround time or percent of charge closed within 24 or 48 hours, or the clinician time that's spent in doing documentation outside of work hours. So you want a nice numeric metric that you're going to track, and we want to make sure that we're reducing the lowest value work. Secondly, and this is so important, you're going to have to treat your agents like a new kind of employee. You're going to have to give them job descriptions and clear job boundaries. You're going to have to give them standard operating procedures and escalation paths. So when an agent starts to spin, if it's going around in circles for days over, I can't find that distribution list, who do I go to when I can't find a document? Who reviews the agent's decisions? Who can override it? Make sure that this is kind of written down as you're understanding your workflows where your agents are going to be taking over and making decisions on their own. Have the right metrics in place from day one, whatever that is. And one of those metrics should be a hallucination or an error rate on the sampled outputs. There's another example that didn't make the cut for this podcast, but I remain very interested in it. Carnegie Mellon put together a shell company full of agents that were passing tasks from agent to agent. You had like a tech support team and a customer service team and all sorts of things. They found that something like 75% of the tickets that were generated were not closed appropriately. So we want to make sure that you are looking at the agent's output just like you would look at a human being's output. Exactly along these lines, you want to make sure that you're establishing a regular quality assurance cadence and sampling plan. So whether that's weekly spot checks or whether you're doing red teaming exercises against your agents, you want to make sure that you're poking them constantly, doing blinded audits, making sure that you're assessing both the quality of what they're putting out and how well it's working in your workflows. Don't rely just on automated metrics, but we do need human oversight and validation. Along these lines, we also need to define your key performance indicators and your governance review cycles. Make sure that the key performance indicators are really what you want to be measuring. So make sure that you're incentivizing, because anytime you put a metric out there, people will try to game the system, and so will agents. So make sure that you're incentivizing exactly what it is that you want to see. So do we want to see a reduction in average clinician documentation time without a corresponding decrease in quality? Make sure that you're doing version control and documentation. Keep model cards, especially for your agents. Make sure that you've got information documented on what data they were trained on, what is their standard operating procedure, and have a playbook for hallucinations or unexpected behavior, and have a really good escalation pathway for when all of a sudden your vending machine starts telling people that it's meeting them wearing a red tie. Set really strict scaffolding rules when you're looking at agentic AI, in particular around vendor and procurement rules. Make sure that you've defined their boundaries really strictly. You may only order from this pick list of vendors. You may not go outside of it. My advice is always to start small, measure the right things, and then expand from what you've learned in your small pilot. A really good focused pilot starts with maybe even just a single KPI and a very transparent, very honest stop or go decision point. If that pilot fails, great, you've learned something. Is the failure a tooling problem? Is it a mismatch between the tools, skills, and the workflow? Or is this a governance gap where you had somebody kind of spinning out and you just didn't have the correct human intervention? I would just want to go back to the image of Claudius in that little Anthropic store. It matters because it shows the gap between a model that can produce really good text, really compelling text, and an agent that can run economic tasks in the real world. And these failures, sometimes they look silly, but they give us a lot of really useful information, and they show us some weak points where maybe some governance or maybe some human intervention could really have made a huge difference. If you're designing pilots in healthcare, our agentic event example shows that you really do have to treat these agents like a new category of labor, digital labor, that has to be given access, it has to be supervised, and it has to be constrained until their execution reliability matches their creativity. And then just to wrap it all up, the MIT study gives our final leadership level context. The pilots stall because the organizations didn't necessarily match their need to the tool's strength. If we do these things, generative AI and agentic AI can deliver real value. And if they don't, then we'll be part of the 95%.